I mean, anything you want in life, you've got to want it. You've got to have a desire. And when you have a desire for things, well, you imagine if, again, back to my previous analogy, Shannon and I are in charge of this mound of ants, and we're learning to communicate with them, etc., without them realizing it. When I'm clearing energy, and this is where I really started to learn about this many years ago, our teacher said, hunches, intuitive information will sometimes come through when you're clearing your energy, when you're clearing other people's energy. You may get an impression on a thing. And some of the other people I was learning that skill with were highly developed in that, and they got all sorts of info, and I didn't. I didn't recognize it.
Today's episode's a little bit different in that I'm the one being interviewed. A few months ago, I was on the Miles to Zen podcast for the second time. And on there, at the beginning, of course, I talk about this podcast, about helping men develop their intuition. But in the second half, the host wanted me to talk about something very specific that we didn't talk about the first time she interviewed me. And that was when our family raffled our scuba dive resort. Yes, in 2016, we raffled it. We sold tickets in over 100 countries around the world in the 3-month period that went viral, all that sort of stuff. But it all started with Synchronicities and me having the courage to follow them. So listen in today. I think you're really going to enjoy this one.
Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast. Conversations shaped by curiosity, creativity, and connection. I'm your host, Shannon Miles Halliday, and this show is where we explore new possibilities and embrace the wild, beautiful, ever unfolding adventure of being human. Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast. I'm so glad you found us. Today, we have a returning guest, Doug Beitz, a men's intuition coach, and I'm so glad to have him back in season 2. Welcome, Doug, to the podcast.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for having me back. I obviously didn't disgrace you the first time.
Not at all. Not at all. I loved our conversation so much. And there was just things that we weren't able to get into. And so I wanted to have you back. And anyone who didn't listen to the first podcast, I'll put a link to that podcast in the show notes, because it is actually a podcast that I've gone back to numerous times just to remind me of some of the tips that you've shared. And I found it really useful. So anyone listening out there may want to go back and listen to that podcast before this one. And if not, we'll just jump in. So Doug, for our audience, can you tell people what it is that you do and why they should listen?
What it is I do, the main thing I do now is I have a podcast that's targeted to men. And I apologize to the ladies listening straight up. Why do I target it to men? Because it's to help men learn why they should develop their intuition, the advantages of it, and then how to do that. And I just feel that it's a male thing to be lacking in that area in this current day and age we live in. I believe hundreds, thousands of years ago, it was different, that men were tapped into their intuition in a different way than women do. But I believe the modern world we live in has tended to reduce that skill. And so I just feel men are behind the 8 ball. And so I've got a podcast that I've been running for 4 years now. And that's my main focus, is getting the message out. 9 out of 10 people that I interview are men, because I'm trying to convince the men who listen that here's 2 men talking about this out there unusual kind of thing that we usually equate that women do. And so here's 2 normal guys, and one of them, which is the person I'm interviewing, is usually quite successful in their area of life, whether it's sport, coaching, psychology, medical doctors. I've had a few of them on recently, and neuroscientists, all sorts of people. And these people recognize through scientific methods, through physical outcome from their sporting achievements, etc., that these things really, really work. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I mainly concentrate on right now in my life is the podcast, getting the message out there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what's interesting is that I'd sort of done an experiment with this podcast, and I really was letting it unfold. I wanted to share a lot of things that have helped me over the years and how that journey looked for who my podcast guests were has really been an unfolding. And an interesting thing about the beginning of season 2 is that everyone for the beginning of the season that I'm interviewing are men. And so I found that pretty funny. And when I first started the podcast, you can see by the analytics that there was more men listening, and then it moved into more women. And now the last couple, my male audience is picking up again. And I think the things that we share, I think are valuable to both. And even if anyone feels that maybe it's just for men, you can certainly share it with the men in your life. And I said, like, some of the tips that you've shared on how to access your intuition, what that looks like, has been so helpful. And I've been somebody who's listening to my intuition for a long time, but I just like the way that you explain it and you make it really easy to follow. And so today I wanted us to go through just some reminders of what it looks like to access your intuition. I wanted to talk about this fabulous story that we only touched on last time about you moved to Micronesia, got a scuba diving resort running, and then you sold it in the most interesting fashion. That is such an amazing story. I can't wait to dive into how you sold it. And then also the things that you do, that you actively do to increase your intuition and how you've seen that help, like your diet and other things. Maybe just to start going back to some of the basics, why do you feel, or when did you first notice, and some of this will be an overlap from our first podcast together, that men were really disconnected from their intuition? What was that point where you're like, I'm going to do something about this. This is something I need to act on.
Well, for a few years now, I've been saying 35 years ago, so it's more than that. I heard the term, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I don't know whether we talked about this on the first podcast or not, but the moment I heard that, my father's face popped into my head, and it was like, that exactly explains my dad. He's been living, as long as I've known him, a life of quiet desperation. He's addicted to cigarettes. He's addicted to alcohol. He's a hermit. He goes to work. He works really hard. He provides well for the family. Our yard was always spick and span, neat and tidy, perfect. Never a leaf out of place. But he just hated his life. And every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, when we'd hear him drive in the driveway, we'd hold our breath. And we would, because we knew he'd come from the local pub, the local bar. And he was never physically violent, but he would say things and it would stir the emotions in the house, like in a way that you didn't want to be there. And the best we could hope for, Shannon, as we held our breath, was that he would stagger in through the front door into the bedroom and collapse on the bed and go to sleep and wake up in the morning happy. And if that happened, we exhaled and went, whew, we dodged that bullet. And so as the years went on, I mean, at that point, I didn't suddenly get this fixation that I'm going to develop my intuition and, that nothing happened back then. But that's when I started to recognize there were men living lives of quiet desperation. And when my father passed 3.5 years ago, 5 or 6 weeks after he did, I listened to a very deep meditation, and in it, all this information came to me. It was like, in parts of it, it was like Dad was speaking to me and basically explained that the example he'd sent for me was of how not to live your life, and it really was. And I did heavily judge him as I grew up for the things that his actions, and I just chose at that point never to do what he'd done, and I never did. And he did a really good job at setting an awesome example for me of how not to live your life, how not to raise your children, how not to treat your wife, etc. So I just gone on that journey, and then 15 odd years ago, I was really looking for more in my life. This is back, 2010-ish sort of thing, and I stumbled across things because there was a hunger, there was an inner desire for more. I'd up until from when I was born till I was 13, Mum took me to church every Sunday. Once I hit teenage years, I started racing motorbikes on Sundays, so it got me out of that. When I was 20, though, my wife and I got married at 20. We're still happily married now in our early 60s. We chose to start attending church again of our own free will. Did that for sort of 15 odd years. We don't do that anymore for various reasons. So I say that to say I've had a spiritual upbringing. I've seen, because particularly the church we chose to go to in adulthood was out there on the edge. Super woo-woo church. We were talking in tongues. People were getting prayed for, like to heal the sick. Like, it was crazy. I wasn't out there praying for the sick, but I was sort of part of like the behind the scenes, helped keep everything going. So I was heavily involved. We would have a Bible study at our house once a week on a weeknight or something like that. Wow. And I would teach that sort of. So I've always been always been interested in the unseen realm. Mm-hmm. Like, what is this out there? I read these things. I've read the Bible cover to cover twice. And, plus certain scriptures in there, like hundreds, if not thousands of times. It's not part of my daily practice now, but I have that grounding back there, and I respect what I attained back there. So yeah, I haven't just suddenly gone into, like switched over to that, because for intuition, for me, I see it as invisible, benevolent forces out there who love every one of us and are constantly trying to get messages to us. And, if you go back to church, they're talking about angels and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and they can't exactly tell you what they all are, what they look like. No one I knew ever saw one or touched one or spoke to one, but they're unseen, invisible beings. So I just see that there's constant messages coming through, and I guess that's the background of a bit of. I've probably left bits out. There's probably more bits to it. I don't know. But does that help?
Yeah. Well, I love that, because I think that there is so much connection and so much pointing to the oneness of all things, no matter what religion you've studied or what religion you've been raised in. So how do you think that, or do you think that most men are actually not trusting their gut, or are over questioning it, or just not paying attention in general?
I think it's a lack of education, that there's senses there, there's voices, there's information comes through, but they're not trained to recognize it. And not trained, it's probably not the right word, but yeah, I just don't think they recognize it or realize that it's there, or what it is, or how helpful it is. Because there's not a man on the planet that wouldn't say, I knew I should have done that, or I knew I shouldn't have done that. I don't care if you are the richest person on the planet or you've been homeless for your whole life. We know when there's times have occurred. And so, but even that doesn't slap most of us into realizing that there was help there. We don't realize that there is invisible, benevolent beings there. And an analogy I've got of that one is, just imagine, Shannon, you and I got tasked with a job, and this is our job. It's like, okay, here's a nest of ants, and there's 1,000 ants in the nest, and it's our job to keep them alive and to make their life good. Now, because we're big, and we're basically invisible to them because we're so big, they can't even see us. We look over in the next door neighbour's yard and we notice the hose broke. And so the tap's running free now, and the water's slowly running this way, and it's going to flood our little nests, and we're not going to have any, they're all going to drown. So what do? We go, oh, here's a big piece of cardboard. We stick it down to block the water and to divert the ants in a different direction. Now, some of the ants will just go recognize that as a block and let's go the other way. We'll get some stubborn ants that'll try and climb over the cardboard and keep, because they want to go that way. And you and I are trying to direct them, and we're like, come on, you little buggers, like we're trying to help you, you know? And so we're not allowed to pick up each ant individually and take them 500 feet away to safety. That's out of our scope. We have to sort of subtly do things. And so that's what I see. These invisible beings are subtly helping us, but there's rules they've got to follow. They can't live our lives for us. You and I can't go into one of those ants' bodies and talk to all the other ants quickly and say, quick, run this way because it's safer. We're not allowed to do that. And so, that's just, I guess that's how I see it, like these invisible beings, and that's what you and I would be to the group of ants. We're invisible beings, and our perspective is so much further back, and we're able to see what's going on. We can see ahead. We can see disasters coming. We can see food coming over this way. We can't just sort of get a big hunk of food and pick it up and drop it right in the middle of them for to eat, but we can direct them to where the food is. We're making their life easier, more enjoyable, and we can see a much bigger picture. And we're sort of assisting, but we're not, we're trying to let them learn how to do it.
Right. So it's almost like watching a sports match, and I've been watching a heck of a lot of them lately, having a very active teenage boy. And I am an excellent armchair basketball player and an even better armchair volleyball player. But I have a view of the whole court, and I can see what they need to do and where everybody is. And inevitably, they don't make the plays that I have, and I'm usually higher up. So I can see the whole court. Probably, I like to think sometimes even better than the coaches, but I know this is a classic parent, right? And so you can see how things can run so much better than when you're in it. But for you, these benevolent beings are actually able to not just watch the game and see, but to put little things in place, or to be able to, when somebody calms themselves down enough, to be able to transmit a message of, you need to move in this direction. Have you had that experience watching sports?
Yeah. Watching sports. Yeah. I mean, I get exactly the analogy you're using like there for sure. Yeah. So, but also too, with these invisible benevolent beings, they're not all-knowing, all-seeing. They're not God. So they've got personalities too. So they're going to habitually do similar things. So they might use the same assistance once a day, once a week, once a year. I don't know. And so we can sort of go, oh, that happened last year and when that happened last year, this happened. Oh, very interesting that this occurred. And so we can start to recognize the patterns, the familiarities in life, that we can start to do that. And like you said before, do you think men are just sort of, why aren't they following along with this? Just, I think, out of ignorance. So, and part of my role is to help them say, well, this stuff's happening for a reason, and it will continue to happen that way because you've been assigned Doug and Shannon to help you,
right.
And this nest of ants, we're going to help them, and we're going to help them in similar ways regularly because we have limited amounts of information and knowledge and supplies and to assist them. And so we're going to, when water's coming, it's going to flood their nest out. We do one we do A, and if that doesn't work, we do B. And if they start to see A and B happening, they can go, oh, we think it's going to rain and be flood. We better do this. We've probably got 30 minutes till the water gets here. Let's make some adjustments.
Yeah.
And in our own lives, things like that can start to happen, patterns and stuff. And it's different for everybody, because how we tune into these things are different. And we've talked about that. You can go into that with food like I did last time. It changes the frequency and the messages. You go back to the radio in your car, different frequencies come through different ways, and you hear different radio stations. If you only listen to AM, but the good stuff's on FM, you miss, you're not tuning. If you don't have an FM radio, you can't tune into it. You've got to make adjustments. Yeah.
Well, so let's bring it, I didn't think we were going to go here, but let's bring it right back. And for anyone that's listened, been a regular listener, this will not surprise you, because I've interviewed mediums and people that have experienced near death. I've interviewed Dan Gorky, who introduced us, in fact, from the telepathy tapes. And everyone knows me, and Doug for that matter, as very curious individuals. But let's just dive into these benevolent beings, just in case, because somebody, I'm sure, at the beginning of this podcast, when we start talking about it, they're like, well, wait a second, what do you mean by that? And so who are these benevolent beings, do you think, for you, and how do you get them? And then how do you meet them? How do you know? Like, how do you think, well, I'm sure that so-and-so down the street has got a few because they're so lucky, or so-and-so should have died at least 10 times and they haven't. So they must have somebody. Explain this to us, Doug.
I can give you 10 different explanations, but none of them I know for a fact, because I'm here in this in my cocoon that I'm in right now, my body, my mind, and I hear lots of different examples, which I'll run through a couple. I've never met my two grandmothers. One of them died 20 years before I was born. The other died 30 years before I was born. And the first 20 years of my life, that didn't mean much to me because they weren't there. They were but as the years went on, I started to think, and I like to think that my grandmothers look out for me. There's a specific reason for that, but I like to think that. Is it really my grandmother's? I have no idea, Shannon. And then I hear other trains of thought that we have a soul family made up of 20 to 50 people that and now to go with this one, you're going to have to believe in reincarnation. And if you don't, I'm sorry. And I'm not trying to tell anyone who's listening that reincarnation's real and they should believe in it. You believe in whatever you want to believe in. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. I'm saying you're you, I'm me. For me, I believe that. And so the story there goes that potentially when we incarnate, we tend to incarnate with quite a few people from this group of 20 to 50 soul beings that we group together with when we're not here on this earth or on another planet for that matter, wherever we've decided to incarnate that time. And so we'll typically, some of them are here, some of them are there. And some of them are our guardian angels right now. We can use that term. If you read the Bible, they're our guardian angels, or whatever you want to see them. And I did just think of another one just then, a different angle again, and it eludes me for a moment, but I know it'll come back. So that's, another way I look at this life we're in right now is potentially it's a game. It's a learning simulation for us. It's a development simulation where we're here to do things, and potentially when we go to sleep and dream, maybe that's our real life. I'm not sure. I hear all these things and I think, wow, that's really interesting. That could be true, or part of it could be true. And so it gives me hope, and it gives me comfort to believe that there is someone out there helping me, because if there's not, I don't fun. Because I've recognized help coming from places so many times. Synchronicities, just signs, symbols, and things like that that have happened at specific times. And some people could listen to that and say, Doug, that's just all made up in your mind. There'd be a term for it, some sort of scientific term that I'm not aware of. And that might be true. But, if you think I'm dreaming, don't wake me up. I'm happy with how I am right now. If you think I'm totally ignorant, that's fine. I'm happy to stay in my ignorance because it makes me happy. And on that one, happiness doesn't last real long that often. We're all striving to be happy. Something that I've realized in recent years that I have become is content. Mm. And contentment tends to hang around a lot longer than happiness. And I love to be happy, but I tend to find for me that feeling doesn't last as long as I would like. But yeah, I'm very content. I'm content with looking at life through 50 different lenses of how it might be, and them all semi-overlapping a bit, and I have similarities, but it leads me to what I've already said, invisible, benevolent forces that I met them? I believe I have. Here's the one that I couldn't recall before. I've heard another analogy that we as beings are so powerful that if the whole of us were in these physical bodies, we'd explode. So that we've only sent a small portion of who we are to fill this body. So potentially, my part of my invisible benevolent help is the rest of me.
Yeah, your higher self.
Yeah. And my higher self, who knows me extremely well, is there assisting me, helping me through this particular one. So can I prove any of that? No. Do I care? No. I don't care that I can't prove it because I know it inside. Yeah. And what exactly do I know? I'm not exactly that sure what I know, but it's a mix of all those things and other things that make me feel content and happy with how things are going.
Well, and then to live a life that doesn't have so many bumps.
Or a life that isn't quiet desperation.
Yeah.
All of these things don't make me quietly desperate. They make me happy, satisfied, content, and loving and enjoying life.
Yeah, and why that is so important is because there's people you're interacting with all the time. And by being in your space, they're going to walk away feeling a little bit better than being in somebody else's space who's stressed or riled up about something. And we all know those people, and you can feel it as soon as you walk into a room. And so I do think that is important. And it's not necessarily not seeing what's going on. It's choosing how you show up within what is going on.
Mm. Yeah. And I love what you just said there about, just us being around people makes them feel better. And it's taken me a long time, and I'm not there yet, that's for sure. But I'm sticking my nose into other people's lives an awful lot less now than I used to. I used to think I had the answers, knew the answers, and that people need, and I got those answers so that I could share them with people and they needed to hear them. That's probably why I've gravitated more to the podcasts, so that people have the option to listen or not. And I'm not standing in their face telling them about how wonderful this is, that is, da-da-da-da. It's like, here's the topic for the week. Here's who I'm talking to. If you want to listen in, the info's there. I'm not holding stuff back from you, but I'm not forcing it on anyone. And maybe that because the messages are just for me. Not all of them, but some of them. And I'm starting to learn that more. So I'm like trying to back off and just use my presence, whether it's physical or my presence on a podcast or wherever, to get a message across to people or make people feel a little different, better, or whatever. Yeah.
So what are some ways that we can train this being able to get the help, listen to our intuition, tap into what's available to us. I know last time we talked about that restaurant story, and it was so good. And I put that into practice. But do you have some other just tips on that?
Well, I think a desire for it. I mean, anything you want in life, you've got to want it. You've got to have a desire. And when you have a desire for things, well, you imagine if, again, back to my previous analogy, Shannon and I are in charge of this mound of ants, and we're learning to communicate with them, etc., without them realizing it. And we find half a dozen of those ants are very interested in communicating with us more to get help. So all of a sudden, we're now like, we're watching these 6 a little bit more because they want our help. The others, we've got another dozen or 2 who just reject us constantly, and the others are like blasé, they don't even have no idea. And so we can see the interest level in them, where they're benevolent, invisible help. We're going to pour a little bit more effort because they're requesting it. So like I've driven in the car on my own many times, and I don't do this all the time, that's for sure, but I've got frustrated, I've got just whatever, and I just cry out to the universe emotionally, and not in an angry way at all, but seeking help, letting them know, hey, like, I know this is happening and I want that to happen. And it's not like I want to win the lottery or I want a better job. No, I'm not talking about that. It's like, I need help. Like, I know you're out there. I know you know the answers to these things, or even if there's not a right answer, there's a better answer for what's going on in my life. Send the help. So I think that desire from us and vocalizing it internally and externally, and you don't have to tell anyone else about it, so that those invisible forces are going, okay, boom, because then it's like, you want the help, we'll give you the help. But be careful what you ask for, Shannon, because I've done that a couple of times and I've got the help I've asked for, and it's been really scary when it's occurred. And you're like, oh, it showed up. Uh-oh. So just, always be careful what you ask for. Use wisdom and even ask for that. Say, I'm feeling a quiet dissatisfaction within myself that I don't have all that I need in this life. Please give me the wisdom to ask for what it is I do need. And start there, and look, I'm just going to reach around here. I've got these little bits of paper here. They're folded with little messages on. I interviewed a gentleman, Dr. Larry Burke, a couple of months ago, and he's an alternate radiologist. And anyway, he's right into dream things and that sort of stuff. So he's taught me now to write on pieces of paper what it is I want, fold it up, put it under my pillow. And so at night, just before I go to bed, I read it and I pop it under my pillow. Now, does it manifest every night? Not always, but sometimes. And it's like, well, it doesn't mean it's not going to manifest in the days or weeks or months later. And I'm not writing down there, I want to win the lottery. I'm like, I write stuff down like, as I'm sleeping, I will come up with awesome questions for my podcast guests and stuff like that. Just broad strategies. And I don't need to wake up and have like 4 questions in my head as I wake. I don't need that. But it's just like, I've asked for that specific help because I want that to occur. I want to ask good questions and stuff like that. For him, because he follows dreams a lot, he writes stuff down like, tonight I will remember my most important dream. So it's written a note to invisible benevolent forces saying, hey, this is some help that I'm seeking tonight. And I'm not saying what I want to dream about. I'm whatever. So that's one thing, is having that desire. Last time we spoke, I know I talked about meditation. I find that extremely important, to be tapping in that way to quieten the world. And, and look, if we see 5 of our little ants down there meditating because they're deliberately trying to connect to us. We're like, oh, aren't they cute? Like, let's pat them on the head. Like, let's listen to what they're saying, Shannon. And so we'll deliberately tap in. We're like, oh, okay, we didn't think of that they'd be interested in that. Oh, let's have a talk about that over the next day, see what we can do with about that, and try and pop that into their lives. Yeah, that's interesting. And you know what? The rest of the ants would probably benefit from that too. And so we'll work on something. We'll give a little bit now, and over the next week we'll, because if we give it all to them at once, it actually could hurt them. So we'll just dribble.
Well, they may not recognize it.
It's true, or it might go to waste. Like whatever. So So I think those, that desire, meditation for sure, and tapping in, diet definitely. And I was listening to an ebook yesterday. Have you ever heard of the Gene Keys?
Yes.
Okay. So I heard about it several years ago, but did nothing about. Well, I went on the website, had a bit of a look for an hour or two. And then just recently I've downloaded the book. It's a 35-hour ebook. And I'm only 10% of the way in. But already they're talking about one of these gene keys will cause mutations in our body for the better. And it's talking about acid-alkaline balance, how our bodies will then mutate in a way to help with the food that comes into our body. Because many years ago, probably 12, 13 years ago, I read a book called The Acid-Alkaline Diet for Dummies. Do you remember that whole series of books for dummies?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a job based on how to do Microsoft Office for dummies.
There you go. So it was one of those, and I read that. And it was written by a intensive care nurse. And she'd observed a lot of different things with people's different pH in their body. And that comes from diet, what you put, and not only from diet, the acid-alkaline balance, that's from stress and chemicals and all sorts of things, but a lot of it with diet. So even in that, and the Gene Keys is a very deep, teaching. But they came back to the physical body and what was going in and out of it and how our body would regulate the acid and alkaline. And that was a physical thing. So what goes in and out of our bodies, or what we're feeding into it physically, is definitely important. And I talked about that in the previous podcast. I think, so then to go on, other tips is when we do get these little hunches, or we're in a meditation or we're not, and we just get this little thought, thinking, and I had one while I mentioned to just as we were starting, cleared my energy before we started this. And that's not a ritual for me. It's not something it's not something I do before every podcast. Don't get hooked on like I've got to do that. I do it at random times for different reasons. I had some spare time and I did it this morning. When I'm clearing energy, and this is where I really started to learn about this many years ago, our teacher said, hunches, intuitive information will sometimes come through when you're clearing your energy, when you're clearing other people's energy. You may get an impression on a thing. And some of the other people I was learning that skill with were highly developed in that, and they got all sorts of info. And I didn't. I didn't recognize it. But when I was clearing my energy before, I had a sudden revelation, which I'm not going to share because people would be grossed out by it. But for me, it was very, very helpful. It's not one I would share. If I shared it, you'd be like, oh, Doug, I'm going to have to edit this bit out.
Everyone's dying to know, but I think
yeah.
It's like my husband always said to me about ever since my son came along, you just want to talk about poop. I'm like, poop is very important to talk about, especially when you have a child. But it's like, people don't need to know. So it's okay. I'll say that.
Yeah, we won't go there. So I got, while I was clearing energy, and what it made me realize is when I started to learn that back in 2017, if that thought had come across back then, I would have never have recognized it as intuitive information. But today, it's because of other information that's come across my screen in the past 2 weeks. I was able to put other things together because I was exposing myself to other information. And then when this thing occurred while I was clearing my energy, the thought, I was like, oh, wow, I'm able to now, tie these things together. And it's like, I just got an intuitive impression right then. And I was pretty impressed with myself, but I'm just finally recognizing it, because I don't run a men's intuition podcast because I am one of the top 5% intuitive men on the planet. I'm probably at the other end of the scale, Shannon, but I recognize it, and I've got a strong desire. Like if it was learning to play the piano and trying to teach men to play the piano, you wouldn't want to listen to me. I'm not highly developed playing the piano. It would be scratchy. It would be like, oh, but I'm getting better all the time because it's my life now. And so I'm getting much, much better at recognizing it. And my little invisible benevolent beings, I know sometimes they sit up there and look at each other and go, thank whatever for that. He finally got it. Like we've been slapping him over the head with that one for the last 7 years. And they breathe a sigh of relief, look at each other and shake their heads and go, okay, next one. How long's this one going to take? And sometimes I get them straight away and they probably go, oh, wow, that was amazing. And then the next one, oh, here we go. This one's going to take weeks or months again to get this message through to him.
If you don't get it, so don't lose hope.
Yeah,
you don't get
exactly.
It right away. Try again.
Yeah, I know. And so I think it's just that these invisible benevolent beings have a much bigger view of life, and time's probably not is very different for them. What's seeming to take years or months for me is probably short moments for them, and it's not so bad. So, but I don't think they give up on me because they know in the next life they're in there and I'm there at their guide.
Well, I love that.
Tag team.
I think that intuition is also biological, not just spiritual.
Biological, like feeling it through your body.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 10 times yes. It's definitely. And in saying that, we can use our eyes to see things. Like for me, if I'm starting to ponder something, I'm thinking, I've got to make this really big decision and it's really going to affect my family and I really want to do this. It's like, I really, really, really want to do this, but it's really going to bother the family and something will happen. But I know long-term it's going to be really good. And this happened to me once. And then I sort of walked out of where I was and these 2 butterflies just started circling in front of me, like within 2 feet in front of me. And I sort of walked like 10 feet and they stayed there. And then I stopped and I'm like watching and I'm like, oh, wow, that's so unusual. And I just immediately tied it to this decision I was going to make, that I needed to have the guts to do it, the courage to just step out and do it. And know that the consequences wouldn't be that bad for me or for anyone else. It was the benefit, that people would see the benefit of it fairly quickly and be not too grumpy with me. And it worked out that way. It's and to me, that was just a sign. It was like my guides were going, Doug's really struggling with this one. He's on the edge. We've just got to show him that it's the best thing. And it was just like, whoa, it's like crazy butterfly thing in front of me. And I'm like, that's not the first time butterflies have given confirmation to me, but it was really spectacular. And I was like, oh,
that's cool.
And I was game then to take that extra step and everything went fine.
Right. I have one butterfly story that I just have to share with you right now. And then I want to talk more about the, biology side of intuition. But so there I am in Hawaii. I hadn't seen any butterflies yet. And I just kind of had noticed that thought earlier. I'm following this truck and they have this big mattress on the back of this little truck. And I see a huge butterfly fly right beside my car window at the stop sign. And I was like, I saw the butterfly, I noticed the butterfly, and it was just like, just be present. You're not in a rush, just slow down. So I did. Within seconds, the mattress in that truck, when he took off, that mattress flew right off the truck. And if I hadn't taken those seconds to slow down, it would have been right on top of the car. And it was like, wow, thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's how it can work.
Yeah, I get physical sensations in my body, and particularly when I first started clearing energy, they were crazy, and I couldn't understand or interpret them at all. And still, that's limited today, but it's a recognition. I know something's going on, because when I was like at the beginning, I showed you my pendulum, and the pendulum does not clear anyone's energy. It's a biofeedback tool. It's like if I could have a little electrical meter there to tell me when, because I'm clearing multiple different fields, and I clear them until they need clearing, and the pendulum gives me a sign that, so there's like, as our teacher taught us, you can use a wet tea bag on an end of a piece of string, like as a pendulum. It's not the physical thing. It doesn't matter if it's made out of some amazing crystal, like a wet tea bag. She said, just squeeze the wet tea bag out enough so it doesn't drip all over your leg. That's how technical it was. It's just a biofeedback tool. We've chewed up 45 minutes here.
Right. Well, it's juicy. Okay, so let's just launch into this story, because I know when I went to publish our last podcast, I found the story. When I Googled you, I found the story about you auctioning off your dive resort. And I was like, what? And I think...
Why didn't we talk about that?
Why don't we talk about that? And I think that that's so important, because it's such a real life example. You were doing this cool thing. Your family had moved to Micronesia. You set up this dive resort. It was listen to the first podcast to hear that beginning story, because we go into that. But then this idea for how you would sell the dive resort, just tell me a little bit about that, because if you were not comfortable with listening to your gut, I don't think there's any way you would have done that.
No, that's right. So, and if people listen to the first podcast, they'll start to learn about the intuition, the synchronicities that occurred there, of how and why we put it together. And it's for context, it's on an island 350 miles north of the equator between Guam and Hawaii, but closer to Guam. And if you went and looking on a map, find Vanuatu, which is probably easier to find, and it's just north of that, but above the equator. So middle of nowhere. We built an 18-room scuba dive resort, like 18-room hotel, restaurant, scuba dive thing.
Like that's people's dream. And
yeah, absolutely.
You were living the dream for a very long time.
For a long time. And then I always knew when grandchildren came, that would be the beginning of the end. And because we've got 4 sons, and then all of a sudden one day our daughter-in-law decide we're going to move to the island with our 1-year-old, with our granddaughter who was just about to turn 1. So they moved to the island. And I'm
into Micronesia, to your island.
Yeah, they're there. Yeah, they're there with us, and they're helping us run the place. And my wife and I are in grandparent heaven. Our first grandchild. We've got 4 sons. We always wanted a daughter, and now we've got a granddaughter there with us. So every day I saw her and played with her, take her over to the vegetable garden, pull off cherry tomatoes, and give them to her. She'd, and put her up on my shoulders and walk around, and it's just awesome. Anyway, after a year, they have announced, look, we're heading back to Australia. And it's like, and which was realistic, normal, there was nothing unusual about that. And
no, but your little ray of sunshine is leaving.
Yeah. And our hearts went with her when she went. But, we had her there for the year. So it was time to go. And my wife and I were like, no matter what, we're out of here. We're going to do a fire sale. We're going to get the, we'd always kept the resort in very good condition in case, because our parents were getting quite elderly. And we always knew that at short notice, we might have to pack up and move back to Australia to start to look after our parents or whatever. But it was a totally different event that, caused that decision. So we're sitting there and we're sort of like, how are we going to sell this? What are we going to do? So, if you want to sell your house, you bring up a real estate agent, they come around and they're very experienced at it. There's a lot of history in your suburb of how much things sell for. There's buyers, whatever, regardless of whether the real estate market's booming or, a doldrums or whatever, you're still going to be able to sell it within a reasonable amount of time for a reasonable price. But we've now got this business on a tropical island in the middle of nowhere, living the dream. But who really wants to, Shannon, pack up their family and move to the middle of nowhere? Not that many people. And it's a scuba dive resort. How many people on the planet are scuba divers? Not that many. And so people would think, yes, it would be lovely to be on a tropical island, but I don't even know how to scuba dive. So that just, it's just disqualifying a lot of people to being interested. But I know there's someone out there who's interested. And so and then I'm on the internet constantly trying to work out how to price the place. Like, how much would we ask for it? And, if you were a business broker, you might have some idea, but then you throw in the equation of the location and they'd be like, ooh, the closest business broker was Hawaii, which was, a 5-hour flight away. And that, Hawaii was a very different beast to where we were. We were on this tiny little island that was 42 square miles with a population of 6,000 people. And anyway.
Not a lot of flight service.
No, yeah, well, that's right. Several flights a week. But yeah, anyway, we've only got 18 rooms, but there's only 40 hotel rooms on the island. So we've got the biggest hotel, but so it's not a booming economy where we are, but it was a lifestyle thing. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I'm trying to work out what to do, how to come up with it. And our son suddenly arrives, and anyone who comes to visit us always announces, weeks, months ahead that they're coming, and we give them a list of things to go to the shop and bring us because we're remote and supplies challenging. And all of a sudden, our oldest son just turns up. He's just arrives, and we're like, "What? Where'd you come from?" Because it's a sort of 3/4 of a day trip to get there. And he's like, "Oh, I just thought I'd turn up." I'm like, "Nobody just turns up here, like, ever. What are you doing?" "Oh, just thought." I said, "How long are you staying?" "Oh, I'm not sure, a month or more." Like, "He's got a job. What are you doing?" Anyway, my wife and I sort of like looked at each other and said, "What's going on?" Anyway, and but we dropped it and we just left it at that. And we just thought, we're just going to enjoy him being here. And he's there a day or so, and I'm sitting in the office on my own, and I'm still going through this pondering, trying to work out how to sell the place. And then I thought, like a year, 18 months ago, I actually did a crowdfunding project to fund solar panels for the roof because the electricity is very expensive over there. And I raised about $46,000 with this crowdfunding thing. And I thought, oh, that was an interesting thing. I wonder if I could crowdfund. What could I do to sell the business? And then I'm thinking, how could you crowdfund selling a business? And I'm sort of trying to, just mull this over. And then the word raffle came into my head. Maybe I could raffle the business off. I know on the crowdfunding sites, they don't raffle things. 30 seconds, thought's gone. Probably the thought was never going to come back. But, who thinks about raffling the business? Nobody. The next day, my son's been there 3 or 4 days now. And he comes into the office with a big notepad and he says, "Dad, have you got sort of a bit of time I could talk to you?" And I said, "Sure, sit down." And he's got pages and pages of notes. And he goes, "I've come up with a way that you can sell the business." And I'm going, "Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, tell me about it." He goes, "I think you should raffle it off." And I'm like, my first thought is, I thought of that yesterday for a moment. That's weird. That's a synchronicity. So I let him talk for 5 or 10 minutes. And then I just said, "Mate, I'm in. Just stop talking. I'm in. But you have to go and convince your mother." Because I know she, opposites attract. And I'm the innovative, go out there, random, radical. It was my idea to start the place in the first place, many years before. So he's like, "Oh, okay." He was a bit surprised that he got me on board so quickly, but it was the synchronicity. I recognized it. And I thought, "Oh, this is crazy, but it's so big."
Well,
and if I don't follow it, this could be, I could be struggling for years to try and sell this place, Anyway, so he goes, 3 hours later, he comes back, took his mum on a very long walk up the beach and back. And she's like, "I don't understand how any of this is going to work, but I trust you to do it." So off we went. Now, we ignorantly thought in 2 to 3 months, we'd be pressing the button on a new website and raffling the place. It didn't happen that quickly, I can tell you. But we didn't stop working for 14 months. There's so many I's to dot, so many T's to cross. And I do hesitate to tell this story because almost at the end of it, And well after the end of it, we probably fielded at least 1,000 or more emails from people wanting us to help them raffle their hairdressing salon, their used car, their dive resort, their racehorse, their whatever. And it was just like, there's a lot of intricacies to it that I won't go into, but we never did help anyone, not because we were selfish, just for various reasons when we started to go into it. And so I hesitate now. So
intuition, not Doug's school of raffling.
Yeah. We even had one couple who desperately contacted us. They followed our format to the T, and they were halfway through the 3 months of raffling it, and they'd sold a couple of dozen tickets, and they were a couple of months into, and it was like, and so I did do a Zoom call with them, but it was, I didn't realize what went on behind the scenes before we did it. And look, ours was, so people are sort of saying, well, did it work, Doug? It was wildly successful. We probably put 3 times the amount of money in the bank when it was all over of what we had hoped we would have got it if someone had bought it off us. We sold in 3 months, we sold tickets in 150 countries.
I'd say that I would have bought one for sure.
Yeah. And look, some countries, there was only 1 ticket sold, so it's not like, heaps. But yeah, I did, we were on Australian television and on 8 different TV shows. I did about 30 radio interviews. It was crazy. It went viral, and we crashed the website so many times. It was wildly successful. And you look back and you go, oh, that money, that was just so good that the universe gave you all that money. That was nice. Everything else that we learnt along the way was far more beneficial than that. My boys say to me now, Dad, you did the raffle. You can do anything. You had the courage and the guts to do that. And it took a lot of work. There was a lot of intricacies. There was a lot of things to tie together. I can tell you, the basics of marketing and websites and viral videos and, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And that was back in 2015, 2016. We actually raffled it in mid 2016. So it was the beginning of 2015 when the idea was tabled and agreed on. And it's like you had that intuitive hit, but you still needed to take the action, and you needed to continue daily taking that action. And having intuition doesn't mean that you stop the work and you stop taking action. Things will not just land in your lap. As I always like to say, it's one of Sarah Landon's quotes, you're getting ready to be ready. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, there was huge amounts of work to do. And we actually, and this is probably, I try to not give advice, but this is advice. When we built the resort and when we raffled it, we, as much as humanly possible, kept it to ourselves. For the whole raffle, there was probably 12 people on the planet who knew we were going to do it. Okay. And one of the reasons for that was part of our marketing plan is we were marketing at it as a world first. Right. Which to all of our research it was. So if we'd have started telling hundreds of people what we were going to do, someone else might have got the idea and done it ahead of us. So that was the main reason there. Plus it reduces a lot of negativity too. You don't have to put up with people, and it's not a lot to people, but someone's going to go, because even when we announced it, absolutely. But after we announced it, I had a previous customer who'd come and dived with us twice from halfway around the world. He'd come twice, and he emailed me and he said, Doug, when the raffle fails, email me and talk to me I'll talk to you about buying it. And I thought, and we had multiple people do that who were interested in it now, and I actually was a bit surprised how many people were interested in buying it. I think, I wish I'd have known that ages ago, but and so fortunately I didn't have to have egg on my face and approached them when it had all fallen in a heap and we'd only sold half a dozen tickets. And people, just for curiosity, and I'm trying to bring this up from memory, we sold very roughly 75,000 tickets to roughly 37,000 different people. Because, some people bought multiple tickets because we gave a discount if you bought 3 or 10 or whatever. So some people bought multiple tickets, and the people that won it bought a set of 3 tickets. And
amazing. Well, what's funny is my podcast that I launched season 2 with was 7 lessons that we've learned from the Alchemist. And one of those lessons is don't share your dreams before, you've got them hatched and ready to go, because of what you experienced of people who've been naysayers or trying to talk you out of it or a number of things. But then once you do get on that path, there's the classic alchemist saying, the universe conspires to help you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The
universe conspires. Or going back to my analogy before, Doug and Shannon are sitting up there trying to help, and it's whatever your invisible benevolent forces are called, like whatever their names are, it's they're sitting there going, oh, okay, they've really stepped out this time for them. Like, we know how much they're sticking their neck out because we were in an incarnation not that long ago. And wow, we really, we've got to press all these other buttons now and start all these other things happening. Like it's time. Yeah. And they're high-fiving each other. Your invisible benevolent forces are high-fiving each other and they're pumping. They're going, yes. They did it. They pushed the button. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Now they're going to have to really work hard.
Yeah. And
it's not an easy run.
I think that is just something that's just so important, is in order to create the life you want, you do need to dedicate to it. You need to take that action. You need to just decide. Your life that you want is not going to come to you when you're sitting on the couch, no matter how comfortable that couch is.
And that's, Shannon, that's why I can sit here now and have the audacity to say I feel content. And that I feel I have not lived a life of quiet desperation. And I remember when I left the fire service the first time, because I was a professional firefighter when we first, I resigned from that and went over to build the place. And one of the other staff came in and he was talking to me because I gave them a 1-month notice that I was leaving. And so everybody knew I was leaving, where I was headed. And he said, Doug, I just couldn't do that. It's too scary. I've got this good government job. I've got 5 kids. And I said, I understand. I said, but what's more scary for me, Bill, is me getting to 60 and saying 2 words, if only. If only I had tried and I wasn't sitting there living a life of quiet desperation at 60. And now I'm not bragging, but I'm 62 and I'm happy that I went and did it. But, in recent days, I've sort of sit back and I think, yeah, I'm 62, but I feel like I've been going to the gym for the last over a year and I swim 3 days a week. And I'm thinking, and I'm more physically active now than I have been in a really, really, really long time. And I'm thinking, I actually got to get onto something else and do something now. Like my life's, I'm not winding down. I thought at this age I'd be winding down, and I have been, but it's like, yeah, I know there's more. And I'm sort of just wondering, like, what more is there now? Like, what new project is there? And yeah. But at the moment, I'm feeling content. Yeah.
Well, we can certainly have a brainstorm on that, because I love talking about these things. And I've just signed up to do a few days on the West Coast Trail. It's sort of a famous hike on the west coast of British Columbia. And my friend had done it recently, and it's a bit hairy. The first half is a little bit hairy, and my husband, in his wisdom, has decided that we should go in at the halfway mark. I tend to jump in and then make it work, come hell or high water. And he's the voice of reason, thinking, okay, we should just try this year. Just going in at the halfway mark, it means we're all like camping out for 3 nights, and that's a bit more reasonable. considering we haven't done the backpacking, carrying our own food. Somebody might write to us and be like, are you crazy? But anyways, I was talking to a girlfriend who'd done it recently, and she said there was guys in their 70s, people in their 70s, solo doing this hike. And they came back and did it every year because they just loved it. And there's so many of those opportunities. Oh man, I've got just a list of all those kind of things that I would like to do.
Yeah. You know what thoughts just come to me? I was listening to a podcast a week ago, and the guy was talking about all the different changes in the world and, all the crazy stuff that's been in the news, not just lately, but for forever. And, the world's gone crazy, nutty. Everything's changed. People are anxious about all the changes. Everything's crazy. He goes, but you know what hasn't changed? Not one bit? Nature. He goes, go. And I do see him on some of his Facebook posts. He's out hiking in nature.
Yeah.
Like if you go on these, hiking trails and stuff where they're protected and pristine, nothing's changed there. They're not affected by all of the rubbish that's on the news. Like AI hasn't affected them. Like and you're like, wow, this is how it was 10 years ago. Like, when last time I came here. So yeah, getting into nature is really important.
I knew I wore this tree for some reason. And it's true because the trees, they release certain chemicals into the air anyways, and they help calm your system. But it was funny, my guest from just this week that I released the podcast. And so when we release this, it might be a month ago now, but I interviewed Paul Lister, and he changed his entire life to do rewilding and started.
Yeah, I've listened to that one. Yeah, it's
okay. Awesome. And he is saying just that about your next trips, getting out into nature, do nature holidays, do nature walks and this sort of thing. And I love that because you just feel so good.
Yeah. And for me, I live in nature. Before we started recording, I told you we've got really heavy rain right now. And if I go, walk out into my lounge room and look out up through the windows, I'm looking at this massive vertical rock face. And when the clouds clear, because we've had so much rain, there will be waterfalls coming off them. And it only happens and they only last for hours and after the rain stops. But yeah, and to be in that, it's so helpful, beneficial for a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah. I already told my husband, we're coming to visit you, by the way.
Good. We've got an Airbnb here on the property.
Perfect.
Yep.
And just on the other side of Byron Bay, I remember you saying.
That's it. Yep.
Well, Doug, this has been great. As you know, I love to leave our guests with just some final words of wisdom. Do you have any that jump into your head?
Well, because of what we've been talking about with the raffle, part of what, to go with those things, those intuitive information and the synchronicities, was courage. I had to have the courage to take the leap, but I saw the green lights, and imagine you pull up to an intersection. When the lights are red, you stop. When the lights go green, you go, because you can see the road in front of you. But I with the raffle, I got to the stage where I pulled up at the red light. I'm trying to work out how to sell this place, how to move back to Australia, be back there with the grandkids. And all of a sudden the lights went green, and there wasn't just 3 lights, there was 75 green lights, boom, boom. But when I looked ahead, there was no road. It was just like a cliff. And it's because if we'd have announced we're going to raffle the place and no one bought any tickets, everyone's going to go, in my mind, I'm going to think everyone for the rest of my life is going to think I'm an idiot, and no one's ever going to trust me anymore or think I've ever got a good idea. So it was scary. And it took a real lot of courage to see those 75 green lights and no road, to take my foot off the brake and put it on the accelerator steady and gently and take off. But realize that the road was invisible and it was still there. So I guess my final word of wisdom is sometimes you need to have courage and to follow through and just trust. Yeah. And have I made mistakes? Yes. Will you make mistakes? Possibly. But courage is something we really need. Yeah.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest the second time on the podcast. I love our discussions, and I hope that this discussion has opened people's perspectives and given people a lot of ideas. So thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for letting me share. I do like having a chat and having a yak, and I'm usually at the other end trying to keep quiet to let my guests talk, but it's a pleasure today to come and be able to do the talking.
See you next time.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon.
Thank you for joining me on the Miles to Zen podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, follow, share, or leave a comment so we can keep growing this community together. This podcast was created and produced by Shannon Miles Halliday with original music by Anna Vovziniak.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.